A wise man once said, "A hero is only as good as their villains." I don't know who said that, and I'm not going to pretend like I do, but either way, what makes this topic so interesting to me is that it allows myself, or you, by proxy, if you want to leave a comment down below, go for it, But it allows us to talk about some of the best villains in fiction. Yes, I do enjoy the sympathetic villain, those who have understandable motivations, ones that if I were in their headspace, in their situation, I would do similar things if I had the means. Ones where heroes can sympathize with those villains. I like them, they're well written, and they're enjoyable. But what I love more than a sympathetic villain is a hater. One who has no reason, or if they do, it's such a petty motivation that it doesn't at all correlate with the amount of trouble they put their hero into. I don't know why they do it, and we don't have to. They usually just have the spunk, the aura, just the overall charisma to match wits with that hero in a way that sympathetic villains really can't, because they're too busy having these ethical debates to the point where the hero has to kind of feel obligated to save them, right? They don't want to hurt them. Haters bring out the worst in our heroes. They make them go into their crash out arcs, and honestly, it just makes them better. They put their characters through the ringer, and at the end of that arc, you're going to see their morals ultimately tested, and that's what makes the stories between a hero and their ultimate villain honestly so compelling. But either way, what I want to talk about and the kind of ground rules that I want to prepare before we get started is that I don't really want to speak on the famous haters of comics, right? The Black Mantas, the Lex Luthors, Doctor Doom, Reverse Flash. We have heard about these characters enough in other videos and stuff like that for me to feel like they have been already covered to death. I don't need to put my 2 cents into it because you already know what I'm going to say. What I do want to talk about is villains who don't really get the credit that they deserve, or ones that even if they are slowly getting it, it's more of a recency thing, and because of that, people don't really know much about it other than what's already been shown on the big screen. So let's talk about it. First one I want to do, first runner-up, is Captain America villains. Now, particularly I want to talk about Zemo and the Red Skull. I think a lot of people don't understand how crazy Zemo is, because he actually, I know a lot of people like to use the buzzword generational hater. Zemo literally falls under that category, mainly because he's a legacy villain. So a lot of people don't know this, but in World War II, Captain America fought Heinrich Zemo, right? And he's responsible for creating the Masters of Evil, something that persists even to this day. He's responsible for creating superhuman robots that kind of emulate the powers of superheroes, and kind of creating an inverse of those heroes so they can fight against literally their mirror. This man invented mirror matches. What makes him particularly interesting and noteworthy is because he's actually the reason why Captain America is not only frozen in ice, but for the presumed death of Bucky Barnes, because he's the person who shot the plane up in the sky, and the explosion led to that aftermath, and as they say, the rest is history. And if we go to the present, where Helmut Zemo, the current Zemo that Captain America fights, some things that he's done, this man does anything, bro. Whatever pops into his mind, he just does it. Brainwashing children to be little tiny Zemos that hate Captain America with a passion, so Captain America has to fight little kids. And then in the Dimension Z arc by Rick Remender, he got an adoptive son, right? And this adopted son fights Zemo in the future. And what happens is Zemo fights him, he wins, he slices his throat, and he takes a picture of that and sends it to Steve as a Christmas gift. Someone stop this man, bro. On top of all of that, he creates the Thunderbolts. Now, the Thunderbolts is kind of like the Marvel equivalent to the Suicide Squad, but instead of being this task force that takes felons and criminals and kind of forces them to do good in Black Ops missions, it's supervillains masquerading as heroes under these new alter egos and basically trying to win the trust of the people. Right? He did this particularly because the Avengers and the X-Men and all those characters were taken off the board, but he was trying to completely change the perception of the world, right? This eventually fell through, but what does happen later is that he ends up outing Bucky Barnes as the Winter Soldier, as a Russian spy and a terrorist, as he's in his redemption arc. So you know Bucky and Cap hate this man with a passion. Post-production Natrix here, just stopping by to say that 90% of you guys are not subscribed. Remember, if you enjoyed this video or any of my previous videos in the past, remember to subscribe. It really helps the channel out a ton. And question of the day: what is your favorite villain hater moment? It could be from any piece of fiction, any franchise that you want to speak about, just leave it down below. A lot of us would be interested, and preferably something that you feel is very underrated and people just don't talk about it enough. But yeah, that's all from me, and on with the video. See ya. Let's go to Red Skull, the second in command to Adolf Hitler, and is a Nazi. It's not even at the worst part, right? On top of that, when he was a kid, he ends up killing this, like, shopkeeper. Don't quote me on this, but he kills someone just for being too nice to him. Then later on, when he's in, like, the Nazi regime, he ends up killing his commanding officer for not making him enough of a villain. This man kills his commanding officer because he doesn't make him into a bigger op. He's like, dude, this is not your story. Get out the way. I can do a better job than you. You aren't giving me enough tools to make me better. I'm just better than you as it is. I'm the main villain of the story. Get out. On top of all of that, he's the reason why Captain America says that famous Hail Hydra quote in, like, issue number 1 of Nick Spencer's run, because he used the Cosmic Cube to change Captain America's patriotic ideology and inverse it in fact, to being Nazi propaganda. And this man changes his entire perception to be one of the biggest villains in Marvel at the time. And that's not even the worst thing. He pulls a Norman Osborn. Sharon Carter at the time of Ed Brubaker's run, during the Winter Soldier type of stuff, and during, was it Fear Itself? During that era? I don't exactly remember, but I remember him ordering his daughter Sin, to stab Sharon Carter in the chest. Actually, no, in the stomach. And Sharon Carter is not only Steve's love interest, but at the time, she was carrying Steve's child, and the child died. And the worst part about it is that Steve wasn't even alive to see it. And on top of that, I forgot that he is responsible for Steve's death. He got Crossbones, another one of my favorite Captain America villains, to snipe him in Civil War. When, like, he ends up, like, turning himself in because he realizes all the damage that he's caused. Crossbones snipes him, and then when all the heroes are, like, kind of, like, rallying on top of Crossbones, all this man could do is laugh like a maniac. And on top of that, he brainwashed Sharon Carter using code words to actually finish off the job and shoot Captain America point blank with a pistol to make it even worse. What he does is he gives her her free reins back, her freedom back, after she does the job, so that she could realize what she's just done. Absolutely diabolical behavior. Captain America villains are built different, man. And you'd think everyone would know that, considering most of them are Nazis, but okay, let's move on to the Flash. The Flash is a very peculiar case just because there's two types of rogues. He has his normal rogues, right, the Captain Cold variety, where it's like they have a specific, strict set of rules and they will not cross it, and they are pretty level-headed when it comes to villains. Then there's the villains who can run at the very least faster than the speed of sound, and probably into light speed. Those villains tend to be more of the hater variety, and they typically go under some sort of Reverse Flash alias. I'm not going to be talking about Eobard Thawne in particular, but there's been multiple Reverse Flashes, and the ones I want to talk about are Hunter Zolomon, Zoom, and Thaddeus Thawne, or Inertia. So let's talk about Zoom first. Zoom was introduced as Wally West's friend in, like, the police department. They were partners, allies in crime for the most part, and one day during a riot break of Iron Heights, Gorilla Grodd comes and literally dismantles his back, literally folds him into a piece of paper, and he has basically debilitating issues for the rest of his life, right? He has to stay in a wheelchair, and honestly, he should be glad, because most people who get folded by a gorilla aren't lucky enough to breathe in the first place. But Hunter really gets mad because at this point in his life, not only has he experienced debilitating issues, like physically, but also mentally. He's going through a lot of trauma with the stuff that's going on with his parents, his wife, the divorce, a lot of deaths that he could have prevented, a lot of things that he wish he can go back in time and just fix, right? And he looks at Wally, right, knowing Wally's secret identity, because this was during the point where Wally's alter ego, right, him being the Flash, it was all public knowledge, right? So people knew who he was. which made him a really fascinating hero in the grand scheme of things. I kind of want them to bring that back, but Hunter looks at Wally. He's like, you can go back in time and fix this. If you can't fix the rest of my tragic life, you could at least fix my debilitating issue, and I don't have to be in a wheelchair anymore. But Wally's like, I wish I could, but when you mess with time, there's usually consequences. And Hunter really throws it back in his face, and he's like, you haven't really went back in time before? Are you sure that you haven't done that before? And Wally's like, yeah, but like usually some sort of fix occurs, right? Or somebody goes back and like sacrifices themselves or whatever that may be. And then Hunter comes to this conclusion that Wally hasn't really suffered enough to really emotionally connect to him to the point where he feels like this is a valid enough issue to go back in time travel. And to Hunter's credit, Wally hasn't really experienced as much as other heroes, but to Wally's credit, that's because he's a newer hero and he has gone through his own fair share of struggles, right? Being homeless, as one of them. But Hunter goes onto the cosmic treadmill and with his wheelchair, no less, and it explodes. And because of this, there's some sort of temporal time after effect because, the treadmill itself is cosmic, as you know. And it gives Hunter the ability to not only walk when he awakes in the hospital because there was a literal explosion, but he realizes that he is not connected to the Speed Force, he's connected to time. The reason why he moves quickly and why everything's frozen around him is because he can speed up and slow down his own personalized time field, right? He has his own chronokinesis in effects, and that makes him faster than the Flash for the most part. And Hunter comes to this conclusion that to make Wally and other heroes, I guess, into better heroes, they got to experience more trauma. He weaponizes the concept of tragedy in a way that makes it seem like he is doing the right thing, right? He's making these heroes more battle-hardened to do the things that they wouldn't previously do otherwise. And one of the worst things that he does is snap his fingers, creates a sonic boom, and it leads to Linda, Wally's wife, having a miscarriage, and she was going to have twins. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that because he controls time, while he moves around, he creates time ripples. And because of this, if you're next to Zoom at any given time, you're able to see into different parts of time, right? The past, the present, and I guess, of course, the future, right? And he forces Wally to relive and see him making Linda miscarriage over and over again, to the point where Wally actually loses it, and in their battle, he actually forces Hunter's head into one of these time ripples and leaves him in a frozen state of being, to the point where he has to completely rewatch some of the worst moments in his life happen over and over again. This is one of the craziest things that Wally has done, and only Hunter could really push him to this point. And furthermore, going into the future, during the Flash War event, he's the reason why the Force Wall breaks, the reason why Black Flash gets released and he goes on to this killing spree. He kind of falsifies hope into Wally, right? He's like, I'm going to be able to give you your kids back, because of course, if you guys don't know, Wally does have 2 kids at that point in time. He has 3 now, which, congrats to Wally, my goat. Spider-Man could never. But what he does is that he gets Wally to work with him to kind of manipulate the forces, because he's saying at the end goal, I'm going to allow you to meet with your kids again, because in DC Rebirth, Wally just comes back from the Speed Force and the timeline has been reset by Barry during Flashpoint, so its kids don't really exist, right? So he's giving all these promises to Wally to only just backstab him in the end. So Hunter, one of my favorite Flash villains. Now let's move on to Inertia. Inertia is a crazy hater because he is a genetic clone of Impulse, Bart Allen, and what he does is absolutely menace behavior. So this is during the 1 year later arc, and during the 1 year later arc, what happens is Wally West gets trapped, I think in the future or the Speed Force, something like that, with Linda, and he raises his kids, blah blah blah. But what does happen is that Bart Allen becomes the temporary Flash, or well, the Flash for this foreseeable future, because he got aged up during Infinite Crisis when he got stuck in time. So Bart Allen is the Flash, but Inertia, in this way of kind of getting his speed back, because at this point Bart Allen is the main line of the Speed Force, and Inertia really has to rely on velocity 9 to kind of keep him up to that certain speed, he tricks the rogues into creating this machine that would slow down time so that they can commit their crimes, right, without the Flash interfering. But what the machine actually does is it saps Bart's speed away from him to make Inertia faster. And what this does is it makes the rogues accidentally kill Bart because Bart has no speed, and they unleash everything upon him because they expect the Flash to move out of the way, but they just bombarded this man with every single element known to man, and he dies. And then when Wally comes back, right, and attacks Inertia, he spits so much trash talk onto Bart's name that it leads to Wally experiencing his second major crash out, where he literally freezes Inertia in place in the Flash Museum, right? He steals all of his speed to look at the Statue of Impulse. And in his words, he says that he will be forced to stare with eyes that will take hundreds of years to blink at the ghost of a man that he could never be. Bars. Bro, dude, Wally's just him, bro. And these villains really bring out that crash out arc that Wally really wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So yeah, Flash villains are on another level, man. I think they're honestly top 3. But let's move on to another one of the GOATs, Daredevil. Now, there's only 2 villains in Daredevil's library that I would consider to be top tier haters. Those, of course, being the big 2, Kingpin and Bullseye. Now, when you look at Kingpin's repertoire, right, his rap sheet, he hasn't done the worst things. If you look at it, it's mostly failed frequent attempts at the lives of Karen and Foggy and all of Daredevil's like supporting cast. He has used a hand on multiple occasions in his battle of wits against Daredevil, but for the most part, it doesn't seem that bad. Until you look at him giving like supremely patriotic nut jobs like LMGs to kill a bunch of random civilians in the streets to lure out Daredevil, and like in Frank Miller's run in particular, Born Again, that story arc, that's when you see Kingpin at his most vile. We see Wilson Fisk at his most manipulative when he basically finds out Daredevil's secret identity as Matt Murdock through Karen Page, right? Karen Page at this point was a recovering addict, and he used this to his advantage, right? He was like, in exchange for cash for you to be able to buy your drugs, tell me Matt's secret identity. And as we know, most drug addicts, it's really hard to recover, right? It's not an easy process, and he uses that to find out who he is. And from there, he freezes all of his bank accounts, he destroys his profession, right, in the legal space, and how people look at him. His entire reputation goes out the window, and he evicts him from his apartment, gets rid of that entire building, and Daredevil has to live on the streets. He went from the high life to bum in seconds. That's the power of Kingpin. And then you have to look at like the assassins he hires, right? In particular, his biggest hater of all time, Bullseye. Bullseye is, I don't even know where to begin with Bullseye. Like in Frank Miller's Daredevil run, one of the most famous panels in that entire book was when Bullseye took one of Elektra's sais and stabbed her straight through the heart in front of Matt. And to kind of put in perspective how humongous this was, 50 or so, 40, I don't know, years later, Matt would end up marrying Elektra. So Elektra is literally endgame, and Bullseye killed her right in front of Matt. And on top of this man don't miss, bro. This man went 2 for 2 on love interests because he ends up killing Karen Page in Kevin Smith's run. Yeah. Right before the David Mack and Brian Michael Bendis stuff, he kills Karen Page right off the bat. And speaking of Brian Michael Bendis, if I was going to like consider his End of Days like Elseworlds book, or like What If, I forgot, this is Marvel, What If we consider the What If book from Brian Michael Bendis in End of Days, Bullseye ends up killing Daredevil. And this is the book that kind of made me relate Bullseye to Joker and Kingpin to Lex Luthor, because after he kills Matt, he ends up thinking that his life has no meaning and just straight up offs himself. Like, he stacks the chairs, puts the tables away, and just straight up leaves, goes out the door. He checks out because he killed Daredevil. His entire life has no purpose, and that's why I relate it to Joker, because it reminds me of if there is no Batman, crime has no punchline. And this creates some of the best villains. Whenever there's a villain who's like, my entire purpose in life is to cause the most amount of harm and tragedy onto my adversary, that leads to straight A villain material. No ifs, ands, or buts. And furthermore, one of the worst and vilest things that people really just don't talk about, and I feel like they should, is whenever Daredevil or whenever Bullseye ends up masquerading as Daredevil, because, well, he'll end up just killing people, you know, indiscriminately. But like, that's not even the worst part. That's not the worst thing that he's done to destroy Matt's reputation. One thing that people don't really talk about is in Ann Nesenti's run. And what he does is so vile and atrocious that I don't think I should be saying it on YouTube. It's that bad. So what happens was, and I'm saying it anyways, what happens is Bullseye is dressed as Daredevil, right? And this lady thinks that he's Daredevil because, well, if the glove fits and you look like Daredevil, you're probably Daredevil, right? And he ends up convincing her to follow him, right? And she's like, yeah, of course, you're a hero, why not? So they go into like the alleyway or something. I don't really know how to explain it because I kind of forgot. I'm gonna be honest, I forgot. So what happens is, just say it. I don't want to say it. He ends up R-wording her. Oh my goodness. And the thing is, I don't know why people forget this. He does that, and not only does he do this, he lets her go. He doesn't even end her. He lets her go just to mess with Matt, so that woman would think that, oh. Dude, I'm going insane just by listing the things that Bullseye does. Even in his apartment, when he's just relaxing, sometimes he'll just throw a toothpick, a toothbrush, a peanut, maybe even spit out one of his teeth at the window and have it ricochet and kill somebody down below just for the lulz, like just for the fun of it, to mess with Daredevil. And even when they're fighting, something that Bullseye just commonly does is throw things at other people so that Matt becomes discombobulated, right? What should I do? Should I go after Bullseye? Should I try to block these attacks from killing people around me? Like, this man is a menace. He's probably even worse than the Joker. I've never seen Joker do any of this. Like, he is a straight up demon, to the point that this kind of relates back to the Frank Miller, if we're gonna like wind back the clock a bit. One of my favorite issues, and I've spoke about this in a previous video, I'll like leave a link down below, or I'll just put it as one of the pop-ups on top, but like, in one of my favorite issues called Roulette, Matt has enough, and he ends up visiting Bullseye because he ends up crippling him, kind of like leaving him in a catatonic state, similar to the like Born Again of what happened in the show, where he's in a hospital bed. And what he does is he takes a revolver and he ends up playing Russian roulette with Bullseye. I swear to you, this is what he does. He puts Matt to the breaking point, and he's just thinking like ideologically, is this the best decision? I don't really care. I smell your sweat. I'm going to go for it. Actually, you know what? It didn't click. Okay, let's try again. Let's keep going back and forth. And Bullseye, I told you, this man is a vegetable. He can't even talk, but like the horror in his eyes, you could still see. It's that apparent. Man, Bullseye is just built different. I don't know. But either way, guys, what do you think? Leave your most underrated haters in comics and maybe even just in fiction. I'd like to know down below. I'd like to see what you guys think. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care.